Okay, so today we're going to talk about pricing. So this particular series is made up of 3 parts. We're going to cover part 1 right now, and then part 1 is all about preparation. Part 2, which we'll get to later in the week, is about interpretation. And then part 3 is all about tying it together with the conversation. Okay, I always start this way, mission and vision. I do it lots of different reasons, but one, and probably the most important, is so that you guys can be thinking about what your mission and what your vision statements should be as they relate to your own businesses. Really think about that. It takes some time. Missions are great because they provide you with clarity and the direction that you want to go. From there, you can create a plan of how to reach your goals according to your mission. Values, same thing. These are company values. We are working on this as we speak as a staff, trying to make sure that everything that's there are things that we feel strongly about, and then also adding to that list. Beliefs. This is not a full list of our beliefs. However, the one in blue is the one that's going to be most relevant to our discussion today, and that one says that we believe focus is the key to success. What we're going to talk about over the next 3 days is a proven 7-step pricing strategy broken into those 3 parts. So preparation, which is what we're going to talk about today, interpretation, and conversation. And after, the whole goal is that you guys can feel confident in being able to talk with your seller that helps them discover for themselves where they should be priced when it's time for them to enter the market. Here's all that you can do to get the most out of today. Try to keep an open mind. Maybe your pricing strategy incorporates some of these things. Maybe it's all of it. Maybe you do it a different way, but these same techniques are used. Either way, try to keep an open mind. Limit your distractions and then write down anything that stands out to you. Little FYI, the method that we're going to talk about over the course of the next couple of days has more than 15 years of proven support behind it. So, as you guys know, what we think matters. Our beliefs affect our what? Behaviors. The way we think is where it all starts. So, it only makes sense to review what we believe to be true about pricing, right? So the first one, informed people make intelligent decisions. The more you know, the more confident you can feel in the choices that you make. Secondly, pricing homes is not an exact science. It changes all the time, right? Number 3, pricing homes is neighborhood or area specific. Number 4, there's a difference between value, price, and entry. Agree or disagree? I agree. Big difference between value and price. Hi. Welcome. So number 5, buyers determine value. And that makes sense. Do you guys agree with that? I do too. And number 6, sellers determine price. That's going to make a lot more sense as we get through this. Okay. Number 7, who determines entry? Competition, right? What the market's doing. And then number 8, the pricing game is all about justification. What does that mean to you guys? Pricing is all about justification.
You have to justify why you have it at that price.
Why is that important?
Well, you have to have something to
base your numbers from.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And we're going to talk about why that's so important as we go through these steps. Number 9, seller needs can never be used to justify value. Do you guys agree?
Yes.
Oh, 100%. Even though they really, really want it to.
Yes, like my Pinewood house.
Your Pinewood house, the one with the great kitchen.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And I know we were kind of high, but.
Did you get her to come down on it at all after?
When I called her to say, okay, during sales meeting, I said, okay, guys, what's the deal with Pinewood? And she said, she had an offer on a house around Georgetown at Adele
Uh-huh.
Webb,
Right.
Dell City, Sun City, or something around there. And they weren't going to hold the house far anymore, so we just took it off the market. And she said, well, maybe in the spring we can try it at a different price. So she was somewhat open,
Mhm.
but, you know, it just
Yeah.
wasn't working out anymore. So,
I gotcha. Well, sometimes that happens, you know.
yeah.
It's so funny though. Sun City was about 20 minutes from where we lived in Georgetown. It is so beautiful.
Mhm.
It's a huge, probably 9,000 homes just in that
Really?
one.
Never went up there.
It's so wonderful. So my mom, when she was living up there with us, that's where they were leasing a home in that area. So we were there a lot. And it was
Mhm.
just so beautifully maintained and manicured. It was just, and you
Yeah.
see deer. It was just great. Great area. Okay. Number 10, buyers seldom pay more than fair market value. Buyers are getting more and more information thrown at them, so it's making it a lot easier for them to kind of see what is overpriced, what's priced about where it needs to be, or at least what they feel it should be in terms of its price range. So buyers seldom pay more than what is fair market value. That's not saying that they never do, because sometimes they will,
Mhm.
but it's not always, and it's not very likely the case. Price should never exceed value. So true. Because that would mean that the seller's needs are being used to justify that price and not the actual value of the real estate itself. Number 12, there is a difference between taking a listing and selling a listing. Big, that should say there is a big difference, not just there's a difference, there's a big one. Okay, number 13, there are opportunity costs that are associated with taking overpriced listings. What does that mean to y'all? That there's an opportunity cost associated when you take a listing that's overpriced, that you know is overpriced.
Do you mean like you're getting some advertising with your sign in the yard,
Mm-hmm.
that sort of thing?
So that would be on the positive side of the spectrum. So yay, you. Now, the opportunity costs that come along with taking overpriced listings could be great if it's in a high traffic area, right? On the flip side of things, the opportunity cost could be in the form of a missed opportunity, because if you're working an overpriced listing that you know needs to come down, a lot of your time, a lot of your energy, a lot of your resources are going toward that listing, when that could be dispersed elsewhere on a listing that you know is going to sell because it's priced correctly.
True.
So it goes both ways. It's good if it's a high traffic area, not so great if it's something that you know needs to come down and your time is being, just caught up in all of it. Okay. Bonus points if you guys know what the answer is to this one. Home sell for 2 reasons. What are they?
Price,
Uh-huh.
location.
Close. What do you think? Price is one of them.
It's exposure.
Yes. Yay. So y'all both get
Yay.
stars. Okay, so price and exposure. Would you guys agree that the homes that are in the MLS have good exposure?
Yes.
Yes, because 95% of buyers are realtor represented, which means if it's in the MLS, then 95% it's going to be seen to the 95% who are representing 95% of the buyers, right? Yeah. Now, if a home doesn't sell, and we know that homes sell because of price and exposure, if it's not a problem with exposure, then it's obviously a problem with price. Okay?
Can I borrow your pen?
You can. You sure can. Okay, number 15, people have lived before us, and that simply means that we can learn from people who have done this before. Okay, we're not in this alone. There are resources that will help us arrive at the right conclusion without so many tries in between. Okay, it's unacceptable, number 16, to leave the seller's money on the table. Well, that is so true. Number 17, tangible tools trump all opinions. I love this, and this one is extremely important to the method that we're going to talk about today. Tools that people can see, that they can touch, that they can look at, study, and understand the logic behind, that is always always, always, always going to be something that trumps an opinion that there's no basis for. Okay. So tangible tools are always going to trump those opinions, no matter how many years of experience are out there. Okay. Which leads us to number 18. People will trust and follow the things that you can logically and tangibly explain. So proof, evidence. People like facts, not just, oh, well, I think it should be this because that's what I think. Let me show you why I think that in the form of this information that I've prepared for you. Okay, number 19, what's put in motion stays in motion. What do y'all think that means? This was a hard lesson for me to learn personally, just so y'all know.
I don't have a clue.
I like it because I always remind my mom on this one. I love your example. When you price too high, then people expect you're going to lower the price. And then once it starts lowering, then it starts lowering and lowering and lowering, and it doesn't stop, and it just keeps going.
That's exactly right. So what happened? So say that there's a listing that hits the market and people know based on what it's competing against that it's priced too high, right? So those buyers are watching and they're waiting because they're anticipating that price reduction to come. Inevitably, it comes. Maybe a few weeks after, showings, but no offers. Doesn't take long. So then the price reduction comes. Those buyers are like, oh, I'm going to wait some more because now that there's been one reduction, there's going to be another one. Depending on how drastic the price reduction was at the front. Most of the time it's 5,000, 3,000, not anything to really tip the scale one way or the other. So those buyers are waiting the seller out basically. Because once that ball starts to drop, it's hard to get it to slow down. And so what happens is the sellers are like, oh, I see more activity now that I've lowered the price. Let me lower it just a little bit more. And then the offer comes in that's usually less than that. And then they end up taking less most of the time than what they could have gotten if they had just priced right to begin with. So yeah, what's put in motion stays in motion. Very hard to stop that ball from dropping once it starts. And then finally, an appropriate pricing strategy supports those win-win working relationships that we try so hard to create and maintain. So I love this. This is just kind of a visual that walks us through the entire process. What do sellers want? They want to sell their home. That's their primary goal, first and foremost. Why is it that homes sell? 2 reasons, price and exposure. So are homes that are in the MLS exposed properly? They are. So then why is it that 40% of them expire? If it's not a matter of exposure, then it can only be assumed that it's a problem with the price. So then who determines the price? Sellers. And this is going to make a lot more sense, okay? So just stay with me. But do sellers have direct access to that MLS? No, no, they don't. So then why is it that so many homes in the MLS are priced incorrectly? Typically, it's because an agent can't effectively advise those sellers on where those appropriate price entry points are. So either they're basing what they feel like the price should be totally on their opinion or their experience or their intuition without being able to show the seller how they arrived at that price. Or it's just a seller who's like, I got to go in at this price because I know that my house is worth this and it's going to sell. It's one of those 2 things.
Lately, some of these sellers, like in Mid-County, it seems like you say, I think it'll be about this, but they want to go higher and then it sells for the higher price.
I know. Isn't that crazy?
Really?
Yeah, the demand is so much greater down there.
It really is.
Wow.
And I've heard that so much over the last few months. And really, you're the second or third person who's told me that within like the last week.
And in Mid-County, it seems like there's a lot of for sale by owner activity than here. And so I think somehow they find out from whoever sold something around them recently what it sold for, because I don't know how else they're finding the prices. So.
That is very interesting.
What towns are included in Mid-County? Again?
Nederland, Fort Neches.
That's it.
Well, there's Port Arthur, but
And Groves and
Port Acres.
Yeah.
Yeah, I refer to all that as Mid-County.
I do too.
But
They're the ones
Nederland,
on the separate MLS that won't join us, right?
Yes,
Did they join
but
us?
no, they have not. They
They're the
need
ones that
to
are
because
holding
not
out.
everything down there is in our MLS.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, I heard
She's
about
like,
that.
that's another story for a different day.
You know, their MLS dues are even more expensive
Really?
in Beaumont. Yeah, I was a member for a long time, and I
Mhm.
just most everybody started putting them in the Southeast Texas MLS, so I gave it up. But Southeast Texas was like $85 a
Mhm.
month, whatever the billing cycle is, and then they were over $100, like $125.
Oh, that's a big difference. Big
So-
difference. So, Carla, what about what you guys are seeing in Orange County then? Are y'all seeing a lot of for sale by owner too? Or any type of situation where a seller wants to go in higher than what you think, and then they actually end up getting those offers that are higher? You might have to unmute yourself. I can do it from here too. Or you can send me a little chat. Carla has a good pulse on the market over there. She always has a lot of insight when we go to their sales meetings in Bridge City.
Mm.
So I'd be curious to know if she's seeing a lot of those same trends in Orange County, like in Mid County. We'll see. Maybe you can send me a little chat. Okay. Okay, so then if we know that adopting a strategy for price is important, then why is it that some agents don't do it? It could be that they don't have enough information, or maybe they don't know how to interpret the information based on what they understand it to be. Okay. It could be a lack of confidence. It could be that they're worried about any kind of conflict with the seller or risking a way to disappoint them. Oh, hey, Nicole. If you see Carla, would you mind asking her? Because I'd love to know that insight. She's sweet. Okay. Okay, so it could be also a lack of judgment. Maybe they're only concerned with taking the listing and they're not going to do anything to jeopardize it, right? Or maybe that they just don't really care, and they are more interested in leveraging that listing. So in other words, trying to generate buyer leads from it without the real goal of making sure that the seller wins at the end of the day. Okay, could be any number of those things.
Well, sometimes I let them price it where they want
Mm-hmm.
because they're very stubborn, and
Mhm.
I'm not going to argue with them.
Right.
Yeah.
And once they see it's not going to move at this price, you know, I'll tell them, okay, we'll price it at this, but if we're not getting any activity in a couple of weeks, we really need to reduce because, you know, and I'd rather price it right, but
Of
they're
course.
not agreeing to it.
Do you
Mhm.
show them comps in their neighborhood and be
Yes.
like, look at this house.
Yes,
It's
and
cheaper than yours, and you get a
this
pool
one-
and a 3-car garage and this. I don't
well,
know. I mean, that's what I would do. if they were gonna
prices
listen.
are kind of all over the place for
Mhm.
some things.
Right.
And this house is, it's not in the MLS yet. They have to have their estate sale.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an estate sale. The daughter is ready to get rid of it. And her husband is the one that suggested it be higher.
Mm.
Oh.
So, yeah, and it's like,
Uh-huh.
So what do? You
That's
let
tough.
them, you let them price high, and
Uh-huh.
then you wait, and then let them self-discover that, hey, this price is not working.
because
Sort of like
she's
the
ready
wait and
to
see
get-
approach. Yeah.
She's ready to be done with it.
Right.
She's overwhelmed.
Okay.
One parent died, and then within a month, the next one did.
Aw.
And
Oh,
she has a special needs child, and
Mm-hmm. Just doesn't
Just-
need to deal with it.
Wow.
yeah, and it's a great house, but it needs updating.
Mm-hmm.
It's huge. It's like 3,800 square
That
feet,
is a big house.
and you know the comps were all over the board. You know, some were
Wow.
supporting up to like $299,
Oh, wow.
but you know now when I first talked to them, it was showing that. The next time I said we really should do like $249.9,
Mm-hmm.
thinking in my head it's probably going to sell for $199, but
Right.
Wow.
but
You also share with them the days on the market. So yes, this
Mhm.
one did sell for $299, but they were also on the market, you know,
Mhm.
60 days longer than what they should have been, or what the average days on the market could be. Because sometimes like in the wife situation where she's like, look, I just need it to go. I just need it to be off my plate. That could speak to her to say, look, if we price here based on what the other comps did that sold within that 45-day or 30-day range, that's what you can expect because your home shares similar features, similar.
But with houses that need updating, some of those were into the hundreds of days. And I pointed that out, and she's just getting it from all sides.
Bless her heart.
Yeah.
That's tough.
So,
yeah. And, and in those situations, you do, and I hear that in sales meeting a lot, like that's the seller's price. That's not my price. And then it never fails. A couple of weeks later, we'll be back at sales meeting and it's like, well, so we reduced it and, we're still not quite there yet. But they do. And sometimes, and I think I've shared with you guys, that was me as a seller because I was extremely emotionally attached to my first home. And I just had this thing in my head where I was like, we're going to be able to list it at this. We're going to sell for this because who wouldn't pay that for this house? And it just didn't work that way because of the neighborhood that our house was in. The perception is that the neighborhood was old. It wasn't. It was more established. But compared to everything that was popping up in Lumberton, it was old because there's so much new construction. And so even though the house was, I think, 12 years old at the time that we sold it, we had updated everything on the inside. And so to us, it was new and it could compete against what they were putting in new construction, a mile down the road. But because we weren't a mile down the road, we couldn't get that kind of price on our home. And I was stubborn. I was like, nope, we just haven't found the right buyer yet. And we stayed on the market probably 3.5 months longer than what we should have. Because our agent at the time was like, look, at our very first talk about it, she was like, I think that if we came in about here, within $5,000 up or down, you guys are going to get exactly what you need and more. And I was like, oh, I was thinking like we were 25,000 apart. Okay. And she was like, okay, we'll let's try it. Let's just try it. So we did, and we tried hard. And we had a lot of showings. We had a lot of activity, but the offers that were coming in were about that price. And we were like, no, wouldn't even entertain it. So we're on the market. This is when I was pregnant with our twins. And my husband had already gone to Austin to work. I was here by myself. And finally I was like, I don't care. Just reduce it again because we reduced it by 5,000. And then, it's that ball.
That ball, yeah.
And so anyway, we reduced it to where she originally told us it needed to be. And we got 5 offers all on that same day. And we ended up selling. And I thought, man, lesson learned. If I had only just listened, because we'd have sold it within probably the first week.
it is very different when you're involved in it.
Yes.
It's so different.
It really is, and it was our first house. And we were just, both of us were so emotionally invested in it. And, we got to truly make it our own. So that made it even harder for us to kind of see the facts. And, we weren't presented with any kind of information to tell us, this is where you need to be because this one down the road from you and this one on the street behind you sold for this. We were just basing it straight off of what our feelings were without having any kind of tangible information that we could go off of. It was
Did she
just
show you that later?
no. It was just,
really?
hey, this is what I'm thinking. And I was like, but no, I was the stubborn seller, but she had a lot of patience with us.
Yeah.
And anyway, we ended up getting it sold and it was great. There's a great new family in it, but we were on the market a lot longer than what we had to be because of this hard head right here.
If she had those tangible tools and showed you, though, would you have
To
listened
me,
to her a little more?
that would have been a lot harder for me to continue being as stubborn as I was.
Yeah, because you're kind of facts.
I'm
oriented. You're
very
list
practical.
and yeah.
And I like, if I can see it, then I feel really good about it.
Are
But
you talking like a CMA or something?
something. And so what we're going to talk about with this strategy is a way to not rely on a CMA because they can be this big, just huge.
Oh, I quit doing those.
They're
Those are
they're so
ridiculous.
big. And if you're trying to have a seller talk with a seller and they're like, I don't even know what all this is. So the whole idea is condensing that down to 3 sheets, which is so much more easy. it's easier to digest it as a seller, but also for you guys who is preparing all of this information.
Okay.
And it's 3 sheets: an active sheet, so who are you competing against? A sold sheet to know what the comps were, and then you can take it a step further and do an expired sheet, especially if you got a difficult seller like me who says, oh no, we're going to sell for this. And then you're going to see, okay, well, these homes that were like yours tried that approach and they didn't sell even after this amount of time. So we can do that. However, that is a risk that we're going to run if we choose to list that high. So that's what the whole strategy is built off of, so that you don't have to rely on this massive document.
That's perfect.
So it kind of goes back to being able to facilitate those conversations with your seller so that they can be informed in order to make an intelligent decision as it relates to price on their home. So we want to serve as more of a consultant, an advisor, a strategist. And the role of somebody like that is somebody who can determine first and be able to justify what the value of the listing is, to be able to know where to enter the market with its price. So there are 3 things that will help you determine the value, okay? And those 3 things are the features of the home, which I view features as sort of the concrete, can't change things, like structure. How many bedrooms? How many stories is it? Does it have its own private pool? What's the age of the home? What's the size of the home? And then what kind of lot does it sit on? Those things are very difficult to change. So those would be considered features. Amenities are sort of like the cherry on top. So maybe it's got like super high-end appliances, kind of like the sprinkles on top of a cupcake. You know, it's not something that affects the actual bones or structure of the home, but it does enhance it. Okay, maybe it's a super tall privacy fence versus just the standard 6-foot fence. Maybe it's heated floors in the bathroom or something that would be considered above and beyond what's out there in the marketplace. And then the third thing that helps to determine value is the overall condition. Okay, because you guys know that on the same street, you can have 2 homes that were built the same year, one that's been updated and one that hasn't. The one that has is going to drive that price up versus the one that didn't. Condition. Okay. So then now that we know what determines the value, what's going to justify it? In other words, how do we know that these properties that we're comparing it to sold for what they sold for? In other words, how do we justify it? We justify it by the features, the amenities, and the condition of the houses that buyers have already said yes to, or what has sold, and what they said no to, or what didn't sell in the form of any listing that expired. Okay. So then what determines our entry point? What's currently happening in the market? Okay. What's the active situation like? That really, really is going to affect the success of the sale, especially whenever you add that to your seller's timeline. So then what justifies that entry point? It's the features, the amenities, and the condition of your competitors, of those active homes. Now, breaking it down even further, sellers, again, will trust and follow every little thing that we can logically and tangibly explain. Now, please don't hear me incorrectly. I'm not saying that they're going to agree with you right off the bat, but it's going to be very hard for them to argue and disagree in the face of facts and figures and information. Okay. So do you think, knowing that it's better to have these situations where you tell a seller where the price should be based on your interpretation of the information? Or do you think it's better for the seller to self-discover on their own where they need to be based on that same information and that same data? Both, right? Is that where you were going? Because
Yeah.
you're like,
You want them to self-discover.
You do.
But you kind of still have to be an advisor.
so you have to lead them, right? Lead them. It's a difference between telling them where they should be priced. Because here's the thing. You've prepared this information. You, with your experience, you know where they need to be priced. what we're after is to bring them along shoulder to shoulder to where they take ownership of it and arrive at the price where you know they need to be. Okay. It's collaborative. It's a conversation. So self-discovery is what we're after. Okay. And the best way to be able to help lead them to that appropriate price entry point is to change their perspective as it relates to pricing. And we do that by using a proven pricing strategy. It's a process. It's a system. A plus B equals C. Okay. So since we agree that just telling them a price is not enough, we have to kind of switch gears to make it more of a conversation. And conversations are important because they're an exchange of ideas and opinions. It's a back and forth. It's a collaboration. So a cute little thing that I heard was that presentations tell. Okay, so think about it when you're in a listing appointment and you sit across from a seller and you have all of these wonderful things in your folder and you just tell, and you're like, sound good? Okay. And that seller's like, I have no idea what just happened. Okay. So a conversation is more selling. So presentations tell, conversations sell. Because when they get to have their skin in the game a little bit and they get to express their ideas, their concerns, their opinions, it creates a situation where you can effectively answer them, which means it's more productive for both of you. Okay. Plus, I just feel like when you start this way as a team and it's collaborative, it's going to be a lot harder for them to get mad at you as an agent when the home sits there on the market. In other words, when they take ownership of the price point of where they need to be when you guys go live on the market, when they take ownership of it, they can't very well turn around and say, well, you told me that we should have been priced here and it's not selling. So what happened? What can we do? What are you going to do to get this listing to sell? Well, we agreed on this. We did this together. You saw the same information that I did. So let's kind of shake up our marketing strategy at that point. Okay. That's the whole goal. And the whole reason that we go through this is that we're trying to move as far away from typical as we can, because you and I both know that our world is one where all agents are the same. All agents are the same. And there's this perception out there that all of you guys do things the exact same way. And that's simply not true. That's simply not true. You know, one person has a ho-hum experience with a realtor, and so they think that all experiences with a realtor are going to be the same way. That's not true. So in a world where those sellers feel like everyone is the same, the cost of services is what makes the difference. So how can we expect to make more in our commission if sellers think that you're just the same as other agents who maybe charge less? Because remember, the context of this is a listing appointment where you're talking about price. Maybe it's even the second meeting after you've gone out, right? So if we're using a logical and a unique and a proven, more importantly, proven pricing strategy, that is automatically going to differentiate us from others in our market, because others say, oh, the one down the street sold for $280, so I think we can do $280. And that's just not going to work, right? But it happens. It absolutely happens. So here's another thing to keep in mind too. Sellers expect help with pricing. They don't do this every day. It could have been years from the last time that they listed their home. They don't know what homes are selling for unless it's a neighbor type situation where the neighbor says, oh yeah, we just sold, or we're selling for this. But that's, again, one example. That's not what's really going on big picture. Okay. So remember that sellers expect our help with pricing. So we owe it to them to be able to communicate how we arrived at these numbers. And more importantly, bring them on to where they arrive at those numbers on their own. Now, this could be me 5 years ago or whatever the case was. If a seller, I'm going to raise my hand the entire time, is unwilling to listen and or follow that tangible logic that you're going to prepare, then you are dealing with somebody who could be classified as unreasonable. Do not be afraid to walk away. Okay. So, and this, to me, this is a complete gut check thing. This is totally up to you and your intuition. And I feel like just trust yourself on this, because we had to learn that lesson ourselves. And when we did, we were the first ones to say, I am so sorry for giving you such a headache over these last few months. But our agent could have been like, look, obviously we're not a good fit. You guys are, your expectations are not being met because the home is not under contract, so we can part ways. And she didn't. She just was like, well, let's just see, because she knew that this is where we needed to be with price. We didn't listen. And sure enough, when we got there, we ended up with a great offer and so on and so forth.
Was
so
it a RE/MAX agent?
It was. It absolutely was. And so she could have, and granted, I mean, we were friends as well, and we still are. But she could have been like, look, obviously, but she didn't. My point here is that you guys, you don't have to be afraid to walk away, especially if you feel like it's something that they're not going to budge at all throughout the entire process. If you feel like they're going to come around, okay, but don't fall into a trap of tying up all of your time and energy and resources on a deal that is going to sit there for months. Okay, totally up to you though. If it's in a high exposure area, maybe you take it anyway, just for marketing purposes. But if not, really just weigh it out in your mind, in your business, and see, is this going to really benefit me? Or am I going to be completely tied up with this for months? Because here's the thing. If they're that difficult, of course, now we're not talking about me. If they're that difficult at the very beginning, how are you going to work with them when offers due, if they come in, and a buyer wants repairs, or there's something with the inspection report or whatever, right? So you have to think about it all the way through the process. Now, I want to know from you guys, what is your current approach to pricing? Most agents believe that a home is just a matter, when they're pricing it, it's just a matter of multiplying that average price per square foot by the square footage of the listing or the subject home. That's easy. It's convenient. It can be done with very little information. And sometimes that works. Sometimes.
Yeah. It kind of depends, like, say, Westwood houses in Lumberton.
Yes. Great example.
But, some, like, in a more established neighborhood, like Mary Howell or whatever's that called, Calder Terrace. There's
all
it's
over
not cookie cutter houses. And so I kind of do that, but I throw in a little more for a bigger yard or higher upgrades or whatever.
That's perfect. So it's so funny because she's describing the steps that we go through with this strategy, which is why I said at the very beginning before you got in here, it's always fascinating to me to hear how everybody kind of approaches pricing, because we're all doing it differently, but we're all sort of doing the same thing anyway. So whether you realize it or not, you're already incorporating a big part of this strategy as you're pricing homes. So that should make you guys feel really good. Because it puts you in a good position too, because you always want to be able to defend that list price. And you can only do that if you know what things have done around it. Okay, so it's all about that justification. So here's what we know. Price is the key component to selling a home. So we would have to ask ourselves, don't you think that it should be studied and more closely considered rather than just saying, yeah, so that one sold for like $130 a foot. You're good with $130 a foot. We owe it to ourselves and to our seller to do a little bit more homework on this. So analyze your approach right now. Whenever you're pricing a home, do you currently consider its features, amenities, and its condition? Of course you do. Now, do you also consider those same things for what's sold recently?
Yes.
Yep. Do you do it for things that expired?
I usually don't.
Okay. And that's common. I hear that a lot. Like as I've taught this course a few times, they're like, no, I didn't even think about to compare that against what expired. So completely common. Do you consider your seller's financial needs when pricing a home? Yeah. Because sometimes they'll say, hey, I don't care what it sells for, but I have to walk away from closing with X amount. So you do have to take into consideration those financial needs, because if it sells for something that doesn't meet their needs, how are they going to feel about it? And how does that affect them moving forward?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and sometimes if their financial needs are just beyond, maybe they need to rethink
Mm-hmm.
selling.
Exactly. Do you guys also consider the trends that are in the market and the market conditions for the area when you're pricing? I think you have to.
Yeah.
Okay, and then do you also take into consideration those features, the amenities, and the condition of who you're competing against?
Yes.
What's currently active? Okay. And do you take into consideration your seller's timing need?
Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. Yay.
On the seller's financial needs,
Mm-hmm.
another agent had gone to this house, and these people wanted to net a certain amount.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, let me just do a little net sheet real quick and see where we are. And they're like, oh, we've been waiting over a week for one of these.
You're kidding.
And that got me the listing.
See, small little things. Like Charlie says, those small hinges swing those big doors. It's when we can do those small things really well, sometimes that makes all the difference. And in your case, it did, because you ended up with the listing, and the person who didn't send it in a week's time is not getting the listing. So yeah, absolutely. And really, I don't know why. I mean, some of the title companies have those net calculators online. So even if it's not exact, you can still get a ballpark. And I think you guys have a sheet that y'all use.
We have a sheet. And I always look at it whenever I get my settlement statement.
That's awesome.
So,
and that goes a long way too, because, and we don't know people's stories, but if they're saying, hey, look, if they're expressing a real need, we got to do everything we can to get there, because otherwise they're not going to be happy. And our goal is to make them happy and make sure that those goals are met throughout the whole process. Okay. Pricing fundamentals. Okay. So remember when we said that pricing is not an exact science? Very true, but it is an art and a science. Okay. The art of it is being able to lead that seller to the most appropriate price entry point through those conversations. That takes practice. It takes time. It takes studying the material over and over so that you are prepared for it. And the science of it is looking at the MLS and assembling and interpreting and supplying that information to the seller as a way to back up what you're saying. Okay, so the art and the science. These are some good definitions just to keep in mind too when we're talking about the pricing and the basics of it. Leadership it plays a big role in this, because you have to go in with the kind of authority that you have, and that is you are the professional. You're the leader in this situation because they expect your help with pricing. So it's up to us to be able to provide that. And so leadership as it relates to pricing is teaching others how to think, not what to think, but how to think, so that they can do what they need to do in order to get what they say that they want. Okay? An opinion, it could be the seller or our opinion. It's just unfounded speculation. So just, I think this because I think it. I don't have any real justification. Value is a home's worth that's justified by what's already happened. Okay, historical data. Not historical in the sense of 10 years ago, historical as of what happened yesterday and 2, 3, 4, 6 months prior. Entry point, that's the price that's going to net the most amount of money in the current market. And then your list price is the perception that comes after the review and the analysis of the pricing information. Okay. Now, we talked about changing a seller's perception. The only way to do that is to involve them in the process, make them a part of it, not just somebody who sits on the sidelines and gets presented to over and over again. When they're involved in it, they're not only going to understand what's happening on a more, on a higher level, but they're going to also take ownership, and that's what you want. Okay. Another thing to keep in mind, the list price must be less than or equal to the value of the home. It cannot exceed the value. Okay. Because if it does, that means that the seller's needs or their wants are being used to justify that price. And that doesn't work. And this sounds really mean, but buyers don't care what a seller needs or what they want. Okay. And how could they really know? Because they're independent parties being represented independently most of the time. So if that list price exceeds what the actual value of the home is that can be justified, then what that seller is communicating is, I just have this need to get this much because that's what I feel like I need to get. And that buyer just does not care because they're only going to pay what they perceive to be the value of that home, not based on what the seller needs or wants out of it. Now, since we all agree up to this point that pricing should be studied closely and should be highly considered, since it's the key component to selling a home, we should also feel and believe that it's our fiduciary duty to help our sellers assemble the plans and the strategies that are going to result in those needs being satisfied. And a big hint here is that a seller's needs are never going to be satisfied until that home sells. Okay? Big hint. That should be in red. They're not going to be happy until that home sells. Now, the difference in this strategy and one that is not being used outside, sellers are going to control the pricing decisions, which they pretty much do anyway. Okay? Now, just because we know how to calculate an appropriate price entry point, that doesn't always mean that your listings are going to sell. Okay? So, sellers are going to have to follow your logic and take ownership, complete ownership of the appropriate price entry point. Okay? So, involving them in the process, keeping them a part of it, shoulder to shoulder with you. So then, if for some reason you do calculate an appropriate price and it doesn't sell, it's not you they're pointing a finger at. It's something where they then say, hey, let's talk about what we can do here, because we saw that if we priced here, then it was likely that we would sell. So maybe we can do something creative with our marketing, or maybe we can do this instead of, hey, what are you not doing? Why did this listing not sell? You told me this. Okay. Do you guys see the difference? Yeah. All right. So then, going back to our belief that people will trust and follow the things that we can logically and tangibly explain, that's where the strategy comes into play, because it's a process, it's a system, and it's called the 7-step pricing strategy. It is all based on a relationship type approach. So I would say that this approach probably would not benefit you if you are not somebody who likes to collaborate with others, because it is a collaborative approach to coming up with price with your seller. But I will say, if you do adopt this strategy, then a couple of things are going to be working for you. The first, it's going to make this very easy for you guys to quickly become a pricing expert in virtually any neighborhood or area, right? Because it's all based on the information and the data that's relevant to being able to correctly and strategically price a home. So you can stand firm on that information because it's already happened in the form of what sold and what didn't sell. Okay. So that's not anything that you just pull out of thin air. It is fact. Okay. So that allows you to understand really any kind of neighborhood or area that a home could be in, because you've got the information to support that. This is a quick overview of the 7 steps. 7 seems like a lot, but a lot of it happens almost at the same time. So the first one is to be able to identify and understand what the three value ranges are in a neighborhood. So you have a high range, a mid range, and a low range. So those are your three ranges. Once you've been able to see that, you want to test it against what didn't sell. So the first one is establishing on that sold sheet. Okay, where were those breaks in those prices? So that's what determines your ranges. And we're going to go through that tomorrow in interpretation part 2. So after you've established those three ranges, you look at what expired and you compare that to be able to see, okay, so for all those who listed high in this range that didn't have these same features, didn't have these amenities, maybe the condition was different, those did not sell. So those sellers approached it that way. They tried it knowing that they were too high, and that's the consequence. So this is particularly helpful whenever you have a seller who doesn't want to come down on price. Okay. So that's the second step. Step 3 is to be able to figure out what value range is best for your listing. Where does your listing fall within those ranges based on your listing's features, its amenities, and its overall condition? After you know that, you want to be able to position your listing within that range, because you guys know while there's 3 big ranges, the high range, the mid range, and the low range, there's also ranges within those ranges. So say that your high range is at $285 to $295. Are you more on the $285 side, or can you justify $295? So you're still in the high range within those 2 numbers, or whatever the numbers are going to break out to be. But do you have something? Maybe your lot is oversized that could justify that $295. You know, so being able to position yourself within that range. Afterward, you want to verify that that price that you guys choose meets their financial need, the seller's financial needs. And then it's going to be time to analyze those homes that are directly competing with your listing. Because you guys know, if you're looking at the MLS, maybe there's 10 that are close by, but really only 2 are true contenders that are most aligned with your listing. So rather than looking at all of it, really kind of drill it down to who you're truly competing against, 2 or 3. And then number 7, you want to be able to come up with together the most appropriate price entry point that also is based on your seller's timing need. So for example, say that your seller has a property, you guys agree on the price, and they're not in any big hurry. You could test the market a little bit by going to slightly higher because they have the time to test it, versus somebody who's like, hey, I need to be out like yesterday. Then you would need to be a little bit more aggressive with the way that you price.
Is that one going to prison maybe?
Could be. They could be. You never know.
Oh, gosh.
So pricing strategy guarantee. As I mentioned a second ago, whenever you have a strategy, basically you can guarantee and ensure that not only will you arrive at the right price entry point because you're basing it off of what's already happened, but your seller is going to take complete ownership of that price with you. So it's not one-sided. It's a true collaboration. Okay. So part 2 is all about preparing those 3 sheets, the sold sheet, the active sheet, the expired sheet, and how to determine where those ranges are, how to see what those feature patterns are, okay, that drives the value. Any questions on the preparation aspect of it?
So is it in part 2 that has the 3-page example?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And then Wednesday, where we tie it all together, is the conversation aspect of it, where we talk about how to communicate it to the seller with those 3 sheets.
What time is Wednesday's class?
2.
2. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all of my afternoon courses are always at 2, just to make it easy for you guys to plan if you know when the times are. Yeah, I absolutely love this strategy because to me, I'm visual too. Yeah. So if I can see it on paper and I can say, oh, so our house has 4 bedrooms. It also has 3 baths, but our lot isn't that big. Oh, look, but theirs is more like ours. So we could be in that price and know that we would sell. that would have done a lot for me. I still wouldn't have liked it. I'd have been cranky
Right.
about having to be at a different price than what I thought in my head.
Yeah.
But it would make it a lot harder for me to argue with our poor sweet realtor who had to deal with us at that time. Oh, I told her, I was like, I'm so sorry. She's like, I don't care. It's fine.
It is. You know, it's like it all worked out. So it was a win-win.
It absolutely did. Okay, well, thank you guys. It was so great to have you both
Yes,
here.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it.
Of course.
Yay. Yeah, I can't wait for that.
Thank you, Kristen.
Hey, thanks. I'm in the middle of typing you a question, but I'll just ask.
It's Carla, I'm here. I just kept getting on the phone and off the phone. So, and we had a bad connection in the beginning, so we didn't know, couldn't hear you.
Oh, that's terrible. Well, I'm glad that you're back because Joe in our office here, she was saying that Mid-County particularly, she said that there's been a lot of, well, two things. There's been a lot of for sale by owner. And then she said, secondly, a lot of times when the seller wants to price high, the agent is saying, oh gosh, in their head, there's no way they're going to sell for that, but they are. And so she said it's just shocking because it's very, very obvious in Mid-County. And so my question was, is it the same in Orange County?
I don't think it's as much in Orange County as it is in Groves, or that whole Port Neches area. But
Yeah.
I just listed my brother-in-law's house last Thursday. No sooner did I hit the button, I did call Carrie Queen and tell her I was about to hit the button, and he immediately showed it in 30 minutes and brought a full price offer. And I do feel that we were way too high as far as looking at what I thought it was worth. But when I dug down and printed out the comps and looked at size of yards and bathrooms and bedrooms, I think it's going to be okay.
Wow.
30 minutes, it had an offer on it.
That's got to be like a record of some sort.
Well, I did kind of imply it. I just called her. I was like, hey, I'm putting this cutie patootie on, and it's very cute. But no sooner than I called her, she called me right back and was headed over there.
Yay, Remax.
Yes, it was awesome. It really was. And
That is
I
awesome.
really needed to get it sold quickly. He's closing on his tomorrow. He bought the
yeah.
house 2 houses down that Nancy McDermott had on the market.
So funny. Keeping it in the fam.
Yeah, just right on down. He's literally moving 2 houses down.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
And that was an
But
order.
yeah, I do think the world over there is way different. Orangeville's very hot. Bird City's really hot, but not like it is in Mid-County. Mid-County's very strange. It scares me over there. It's so strange.
Yeah, and I hear that a lot because, people are like, there's no real pattern to it. It changes every day. So it's like they're figuring it out just like everybody else. It's just a day by day thing.
Yeah. And this house that I put on the market, I felt was at the very tippy top. And I just was like, I kept telling my brother-in-law, I just don't know if this is going to work. So I kind of called, Carrie's more fluent over there than I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of talked to her about it. And she was like, girl, you should just do it. And I said, well, okay, I'm going to do it. And she said, well, make sure you call me before you do it. And so I did, and bam. And it was an investor that bought it.
Oh
So
my gosh.
the investor knows numbers
Yeah.
as well as we do. But I think a lot of it is too, there is some investors right now willing to pay that top dollar just
Mm-hmm.
because of what we have going on in our industry.
Sure.
As all of these plants expansions, we might not be seeing it right now, but in a few months,
Oh yeah.
there's a big rental problem in this area.
Oh, absolutely.
So, well, I did listen to it, and thank you. That's what's wonderful.
Yay. Well, hopefully you guys will be back tomorrow because, again, we go through the 3 sheets and how to prepare them rather than having to, deal with that massive CMA. But, yeah, I'll record it if you can't make it, but hopefully you can because it's always good to have you guys.
Okay, we'll be there. See y'all tomorrow. Bye, y'all.
Bye.